Hey, this is Mr. Masonette, and what we're going to do in this tutorial is practice rotating objects 90 degrees clockwise around the origin, as well as 90 degrees counterclockwise around the origin. So what we're going to do first is we're going to rotate triangle ABC 90 degrees clockwise around the origin. Now remember, the origin is just where the x and the y-axis intersect each other. And what we're going to do is move our triangle around the origin in a clockwise direction. The arrow on the screen shows which direction clockwise is. So what we're going to be doing basically is rotating our triangle, which is currently located in quadrant 2, to quadrant number 1. Now we should notice that the current location of our triangle is in quadrant number 2, where all of the x values are negative and all of the y values are positive. It is important with 90-degree rotations to figure out what the x values and the y values will be in terms of negative and positive. Well, we are going to be rotating our triangle to quadrant number 1. And in quadrant number 1, all of your x values will be positive and all your y values will be positive. So one thing we know for sure is that the new location of each of our points will all have positive values because they are being rotated to quadrant number 1. So the first thing that we're going to do is identify the current location of our points. A is located at -8, +2. B is located at -8, +8, and C is located at -5, +2. Okay, now that we have identified the current location of our 3 points, what we're going to do next is switch around the x and the y values. Let's start with point A. Now point A is currently located at -8, +2, and what we have to do is switch around the x and the y values. But for now, let's just ignore whether the numbers are negative or positive. Let's just look at the absolute value of the x and the y value. So let's just take 8 and 2 of point A and switch them around and simply write 2 and 8. Now, because we are rotating our point to quadrant 1, we know that all x values as well as all y values in that quadrant will be positive. So after switching the absolute values of 8 and 2 to be 2 and 8, we know that both of these values will be positive. Now, point B has a current location of -8 and +8. And the absolute values are both 8, so even if we switch those, both of them will still be 8. And they will be positive because we are rotating our point to quadrant number 1. And for point C, we're going to take 5 and 2 and switch those around and write 2 and 5. And once again, both the x and the y values will become positive because they are in quadrant number 1. Now that we have the coordinates to where our triangle is going to be rotated to, let's go ahead and plot those points. So point A is going to be at +2, +8, and point B is going to be at +8, +8, and point C is at +2, +5. So if we rotate our shape 90 degrees clockwise, you can see that our triangle will line up perfectly with the 3 points that we just plotted. Okay, let's take the original triangle that was located in quadrant 2 and rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise around the origin. If you take a look at the arrow in the screen, you can see what direction counterclockwise is. So we are going to be rotating our triangle from quadrant 2 to quadrant number 3. Now, the original points located in quadrant 2 had a negative x value and a positive y value, and when rotating to quadrant number 3, any point located within that quadrant will have a negative x and a negative y value. Okay, first with any 90-degree rotation, remember we just switch around the absolute values of our x and our y value. So our point was at -8 and +2, so we take those absolute values and switch them around to be 2 and 8. And because this point is located in quadrant number 3, we have to make sure that both the x and the y value is negative. And with point B, both of the absolute values were 8, so we just write 2 8s, but we have to make them both negative. And the original location of point C was -5 and +2, so we just go ahead and switch those two numbers and make sure that they are both negative because they are in quadrant number 3. Okay, after you have found the location to where your shape is going to be rotated to, you just go ahead and plot those points, and then you can form your shape connecting those points together. and that will be the location of your rotated object. Now, another way to look at a 90-degree rotation is by considering the x and the y-axis itself being rotated. Notice if we rotate our x and our y-axis, the original location of point A, along with the origin, along with the new location of point A, will form a right angle. And if we continue our rotation clockwise, both point C's along with the origin will form a right angle, and also the original location of point B, the new location of point B, and the origin form a right angle. And then if we continue our rotation clockwise, notice that where the y-axis was is now lined up with the x-axis, and where the x-axis was is now lined up with the y-axis. And this is why we can simply switch around the absolute values of our x and our y value, and then just use the sign according to what quadrant we rotated our shape to. So remember, with any 90-degree rotation, all you really have to do first is take the absolute values of each x and y value of the current coordinates and switch them around, and then label each one of those values according to the quadrant that you rotated your object to.
Hey, I just want to say thanks very much for checking out my math video. Please subscribe to my channel so when I upload new math videos, you can become informed as they become available.